Staff Sergeant Terrell Jackson stepped off the jetway into the busy Atlanta airport, his Army service uniform immaculate and his posture unwavering. After 28 years of disciplined service, he had just returned from a demanding overseas deployment and planned first to surprise his mother before reporting back to his unit in North Carolina. His duffel bag swung gently at his side as he made his way toward the baggage carousel, each careful stride betraying the confidence of a soldier accustomed to order and respect. But the stares he received were not those of admiration or gratitude. Instead, he found himself under scrutiny from airport security officers and curious travelers, their eyes wary and unwelcome. He felt the shift in the air before he even reached the escalators. A tension born not of his rank or his uniform, but of the color of his skin. Terrell paused for a moment to compose himself, reminding his heart to slow its steady beat. He adjusted the strap on his duffel and checked his phone for a message from his ride, hoping to move on quickly. Before he could step forward, two officers approached with determined strides. Sergeant Wesley Monroe, a graying, heavy-set man whose reputation for being tough as nails preceded him, led the way. Beside him, Officer Devin Price, lean and by-the-book, flanked Terrell with a cool clinical gaze. Without introduction, Monroe barked, "Hold it right there!" Terrell tasted surprise at the force in the officer's voice. "I'm Staff Sergeant Jackson, United States Army," he said calmly, raising a gloved hand to his chest. "May I ask what this is about?" But Monroe only sneered. "We got a report of a black man impersonating a soldier. Open your bag." Confusion flickered across Terrell's face. He had earned every stripe and every medal on his uniform through decades of dedication. Yet here at home in America, he found himself treated as nothing more than a suspect. Monroe's glare never wavered as he barked, "Open that bag," now shoving Terrell's duffel roughly against the baggage carousel. A small crowd gathered, curious travelers stepping closer and pulling out their phones. Among them was Darnell Washington, the night shift attendant at the nearby petrol station, who sensed something was wrong and began recording on his phone. Terrell kept his composure, gently resting a hand on his duffel strap, but saying nothing. He had long ago learned that in moments like these, patience could be as powerful as force. Monroe, however, seemed determined to humiliate him. In one swift motion, the sergeant snatched the phone from Darnell's hand, crushed it under his boot, and hurled it back into the bystanders. The crowd murmured in shock as the shattered device skittered across the floor. Despite the provocation, Terrell remained calm. He knew he needed more than presence of mind. He needed evidence that would speak louder than prejudice. With a steady breath, he tapped his military-issue smartwatch 3 times, activating the code black. Emergency protocol reserved for high-ranking officers in distress. Instantly, a secure distress signal flashed through the Pentagon's command center. A senior officer was in jeopardy on domestic soil. Threatening glances from Monroe and Price were Terrell's only reply as they forced him into the back of their cruiser. The engine's hum barely cut through the oppressive silence. Over the police radio static, filled crackles accompanied terse dispatch calls. No small talk or idle chatter, only the mechanical click and hiss of a world where protocol had overtaken humanity. As the cruiser rolled onward toward the station, Terrell gazed out the tinted window unwavering. He had served his country in distant deserts and war-torn cities, but now he faced a battle closer to home. Still, he trusted that truth once sent could not be ignored, and that karma carried on the wings of justice would arrive in due time. Inside the airport security office, the hum of fluorescent lights met the hush of recorded fingerprints and mugshots. Officer Kendra Wallace stood at the processing desk, her notebook open, but her attention fixed on the veteran before her. Terrell Jackson remained composed as he offered each hand in turn, the professional military tattoos crossing his forearms, a Ranger tab campaign ribbons, and unit insignia, evidence of decades of service. Wallace, barely 6 months on the force, recognized the precision and authenticity in each inked detail, a stark contrast to the baseless accusations that had brought him here. As Sergeant Wesley Monroe swaggered in from the booking area, he could not contain his pride. "That'll teach uppity types not to think they're above us," he boasted, slapping the table for emphasis. His partner, Officer Devin Price chuckled in agreement, though uneasily. Wallace's stomach nodded. Monroe's words dripped with contempt and prejudice, every syllable a reminder of the very injustice she had sworn to prevent. Under the pretense of checking her notes, Wallace slipped her hand into her pocket and activated the voice recorder on her phone. Monroe's bragging about humiliating a soldier, about enforcing their misguided notion of order, filled her device with damning proof. When he finally stormed off, Wallace slipped away from the busy front desk and found her old friend Sarah Williams, now a reporter for the local paper. In quiet tones, she handed over the recording, her voice barely a whisper. "This is what happened. They need to hear it." Meanwhile, at the airport's security command center, Chief Barbara Strad paced her office. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls from state and federal officials. "Keep this contained." One voice insisted, "No leaks, no investigations." Each call tightened the knot in her chest. She tapped her pen against the desk, eyes darting to the hashtag flashing on her own screen. "Lady in cuffs" outside social media feeds ignited. Darnell Washington's shattered phone video, once lost beneath Monroe's boot, resurfaced online. The camera shook as the lens captured the moment two officers forced Terrell Jackson against a wall. In that clip, shared thousands of times, viewers saw not a suspect but a soldier. His uniform torn. Dignity tested. Through it all, three threads began to converge. Wallace's clandestine recording, Sarah's promise to publish, and the relentless rise of Lady in Cuff. Each step tightened the noose around the lie, and though the airport tried to silence the truth, it refused to be muzzled. At the Pentagon's secure briefing room, former CIA officer Virginia Cross and intelligence specialist Owen Marks laid out the chilling evidence. Charts and decrypted communications flickered across the screen as they traced the flow of federal grant money into a private entity known as Sovereign Security Solutions. Founded and financed by Senator Roland Wexley, this network quietly funneled billions into local police contracts. Cross pointed to financial records showing large disbursements labeled community safety initiatives that in reality he underwrote paramilitary training for extremist, white supremacist aligned contractors embedded within departments nationwide. Marks then revealed a series of intercepted phone messages. One transcript captured Wexley's voice instructing his operatives to neutralize high-profile dissenters, those whose influence threatened his ability to shape law enforcement policy. The term neutralize was disturbingly literal. Weeks after the initial stop of Staff Sergeant Jackson, Virginia Cross herself became a victim. The team uncovered medical examiner's notes confirming that her pacemaker had been remotely tampered with, causing a fatal arrhythmia, an act of horrifying precision carried out from afar. The room was silent as Mark spoke of the technology used, a covert app that could interface with implantable devices. "This isn't theoretical," he said. "They've already proven they will kill to protect their investment." Cross, her voice steady, added that the breadth of targeting extended beyond the military, including journalists, activists, and even elected officials who dared to speak out. General Harlan Reyes, presiding over the briefing, exchanged grim looks with his staff. He understood the stakes, a sitting senator orchestrating a domestic terror enterprise backed by law enforcement resources. Cross and Marks had delivered incontrovertible proof that a systematic campaign of intimidation, ruin, and murder was underway. Reyes cleared his throat. "We have a responsibility to act," he said, voice low but resolute. The assembled officers and analysts nodded, the weight of their mission clear. Plans were already in motion for joint military FBI task forces, emergency subpoenas, and coordinated arrests. Nothing, not even the network's most ruthless measures, would deter them from uprooting the conspiracy to its very core. Outside the Pentagon walls, the nation remained unaware of how deep the rot had run. But within these halls, the tide had turned. Sovereign Securities Solutions faced its reckoning, and those who hid behind badges and bank accounts would soon answer for their crimes. Justice, as Virginia Cross had warned, would not be for sale. As media attention swelled, Autumn Blake, Staff Sergeant Jackson, spirited 17-year-old niece, emerged as a digital catalyst. Fresh from narrowly surviving an ambush near her D.C. internship, she harnessed social media to mobilize youth activism nationwide. Her post tagged Justice for Terrell charted the ongoing conspiracy and galvanized supporters to demand accountability from their elected officials. Simultaneously, a damning video surfaced from the private hunting lodge where the Shadow Network had convened. The grainy footage showed Senator Roland Wexley seated beside General Preston Kane and Chief Barbara Strad. Their hushed conversation confirmed the most sinister suspicions. "We need to neutralize him permanently." Wexley insisted, his tone chillingly pragmatic. Kane nodded, sketching out plans to discredit and, if necessary, physically remove Terrell Jackson. Strad contributed with bureaucratic advice on manipulating evidence and delaying legal inquiries. Once unleashed, this revelation ignited a national uproar. Cable news anchors replayed the clip endlessly, while opinion columns denounced the fusion of extremist militias with official power. Public pressure became inescapable, and General Harlan Reyes at the Pentagon could no longer stand by. He convened an urgent summit in the secure conference room, summoning Colonel Sarah Martinez, a tireless military intelligence officer, Major Owen Marks, whose cyber forensics work had cracked the network's encrypted communications, and Captain Lisa Chen from the Judge Advocate General's office. Reyes detailed the lodge footage in the broader financial trail, emphasizing the existential threat posed by a senator, a general, and a police chief conspiring to assassinate an American service member on U.S. soil. "Enough is enough," Reyes declared. "We're deploying a joint task force, military, FBI, and Department of Justice to dismantle this network from the inside out." He assigned Martinez to lead intelligence collection, Marks to coordinate cyber operations and evidence preservation, and Chen to oversee legal proceedings and enforce orders under the UCMJ and federal statutes. Within hours, arrest warrants were drafted for Wexley, Kane, and Strad special agents, and uniformed military police made simultaneous raids on known safe houses, tracking down mid-level operatives and contractors linked to sovereign security solutions. At the same time, a classified judicial order froze bank accounts identified in the financial investigation. Back in Atlanta, Autumn Blake spearheaded virtual town halls connecting with veterans, civil rights groups, and lawmakers to maintain public momentum. Her impassioned plea for systemic reform resonated. This isn't just Terrell's fight, it's America's fight. As the first suspects were taken into custody, the task force pressed forward, determined to expose every layer of corruption. The stakes had never been higher, because when those entrusted to protect democracy betray it, the only remedy is decisive, unrelenting justice. Lucien Falcon Graves, a former NSA operative who had tracked the Shadow Network's encrypted channels for years, finally stepped forward with irrefutable proof. Under protective custody, Falcon provided federal investigators with intercepted communications, financial ledgers, and operation logs that mapped the entire conspiracy. His evidence connected Officer Monroe, recently suspended for impersonation and abuse of authority, to direct orders from Chief Strad, encoded directives from Senator Wexley, summoned before a special military tribunal. Monroe faced rapid-fire questioning. Confronted with Falcon's documents and audio recordings, he admitted to coordinating surveillance of General Blake and falsifying reports. Under oath, he named mid-level collaborators and described how loyalty oaths bound local law enforcement officers to the secret contractor network. His confession triggered immediate secondary arrests of several precinct insiders. Meanwhile, Officer Kendra Wallace's role as internal whistleblower reached its apex. Invited to testify before the House Judiciary Committee, she delivered a powerful account of institutional racism, extremist infiltration, and the moral imperative for reform. Her testimony, broadcast live, sparked a groundswell of public support for federal legislation to mandate body cameras, anti-bias training, and independent oversight for every U.S. police department. Civil rights attorney Jeremiah Monroe filed a sweeping civil lawsuit in federal court, naming Senator Roland Wexley, General Preston Kane, and Chief Barbara Strad as defendants in a racketeering and conspiracy action. Monroe's complaint detailed how public funds were funneled to extremist contractors, how public trust was weaponized against minority service members, and how whistleblowers were threatened and silenced. Amid this legal maelstrom, Logan Sharp Monroe, his former partner and slated to testify in pending hearings, was reported dead by apparent suicide. His written note, full of cryptic references to what I've seen, bore signatures that forensic handwriting experts said were inconsistent with his known style. Major Owen Marks quietly alerted investigators to unresolved questions surrounding Sharp's death, ensuring that an autopsy and criminal investigation would probe whether this suicide masked a silencing operation. Together, Falcon's disclosures, Wallace's testimony, and Monroe's lawsuit laid the foundation for a national reckoning, one that would hold elected leaders, military officers, and local law enforcement fully accountable for betraying the oaths they had sworn to uphold. As federal agents and civil prosecutors delved deeper, mountains of evidence emerged: dozens of incriminating emails, bank transfers, and phone records that exposed an interstate network of corruption stretching from Capitol Hill to small-town police departments. Senator Roland Wexley was indicted for conspiracy to abuse his office, General Preston Kane for betrayal of his military oath, and Chief Barbara Strad for gross misconduct and abuse of power. Each indictment laid bare the calculated use of taxpayer dollars to shield extremist contractors and silence dissent. Beyond these headline arrests, Jeremiah Monroe's legal team filed landmark suits against the private law firms and police unions that had covertly funded defense costs for officers accused of civil rights violations. These firms, long viewed as untouchable, were accused of running a de facto protection racket that directed millions in public funds toward covering up abuses. The lawsuits sought not only damages for the victims, but structural reforms, mandatory public reporting of disciplinary actions, transparent financial audits, and the dissolution of closed-door union legal funds. Recognizing the urgent need for independent oversight, Congress passed the Blake-Wallace Act, creating the National Police Ethics Council. To lead this new body, Attorney Monroe appointed Officer Kendra Wallace, once a lonely young rookie, now a national symbol of integrity. Under her guidance, the council established rigorous standards. Every law enforcement agency must adopt body camera policies. With unedited public access, implement annual anti-bias certification for all officers, and empower civilian review boards with real disciplinary authority. Across the nation, police departments began publishing quarterly transparency reports, and independent auditors were granted full access to internal affairs files. Kendra Wallace traveled from city to city, delivering speeches about accountability and the moral duty of every officer to protect constitutional rights. What began as a single traffic stop in Georgia had triggered a sweeping overhaul of American policing, ushering in an era where trust between communities and those sworn to serve them could finally begin to heal. In a packed Atlanta federal courtroom, Terrell Jackson testified with quiet dignity about being humiliated, shoved, and falsely arrested in his own uniform. Lucian Falcon Graves then revealed how encrypted communications and hacked camera feeds showed the traffic stop was a deliberate ambush, not a routine check. Officer Kendra Wallace's emotional account of recording her colleagues' racist boasts underscored the personal risks she faced for speaking out. Finally, Sergeant Monroe admitted under oath that he targeted Terrell to teach uppity types a lesson, never bothering to verify his credentials. His own words sealed the case, exposing systemic corruption. As the jury began deliberations, supporters outside chanted for reform and respect. What started as a small-town traffic stop had ended in a landmark trial, proving that truth and courage can overcome abuse of power, and that justice, when pursued relentlessly, can triumph even against entrenched wrongdoing. The verdict brought heavy sentences. The senator, the general, and the chief each received substantial prison terms, hefty fines, and civil judgments in favor of those they'd wronged. In the wake of the trial, Congress swiftly passed the Blake-Wallace Act, mandating on-duty body cameras, rigorous screening for extremist affiliations, and robust whistleblower protections for law enforcement personnel. At Arlington National Cemetery, Staff Sergeant Jackson, now fully retired, was honored with a ceremonial promotion and an emotional farewell parade. His medals gleamed in the spring light as fellow veterans stood at attention, saluting a soldier who had fought battles abroad and finally won at home. By his side, Autumn Blake launched the Next Generation Justice Foundation, dedicated to empowering young activists to defend civil rights and demand accountability. The law school scholarships, youth leadership programs, and community forums funded by her organization drew thousands of students into the movement. Across the nation, police departments overhauled training curricula, and civilian oversight boards gained new authority to investigate misconduct. What began as a routine stop on a rural road had ignited a sweeping transformation from courtrooms to classrooms, ensuring that respect, integrity, and equality under the law became more than words on paper, but the living standard for every American. Years later, the old Ashwood police station was gone, replaced by the Ashwood Civil Rights Memorial Park, a serene expanse of monuments honoring every victim of abuse and every whistleblower who dared speak truth to power. At its center stood a sculpted wall inscribed with names, those who suffered injustice and those who fought to end it. On opening day, families, veterans, activists, and curious neighbors gathered beneath blossoming magnolias as a brass plaque was unveiled to commemorate their shared victory. Lucian Falcon Graves, the former NSA operative whose evidence had cracked the conspiracy wide open, vanished once more into the shadows, his mission complete, but his vigilance unending. Officer Kendra Wallace, now chair of the National Police Ethics Board, oversaw sweeping reforms that transformed training and accountability nationwide. Jeremiah Monroe, head of the Cross Sharp Foundation, welcomed grateful survivors and armored them with legal support, ensuring no victim ever faced injustice alone. And at the park's far edge, beneath a soaring steel arch engraved with the words, "Justice, Justice, Justice," Staff Sergeant Terrell Jackson stood before a new generation of young people. This promise, he said, voice steady with conviction, belongs to all of us. When systems fail, we carry justice forward. As sunlight danced on the fountain spray, the crowd echoed his refrain, "Justice, Justice, Justice," renewing their pledge to uphold equality under law, no matter how long the road ahead. Through this journey, we learn that true strength lies not in titles or power, but in the resilience to confront injustice. The clear message is silence in the face of prejudice is complicity, and only decisive action births the hope of change. If I were the protagonist, I would keep advocating for inclusive education policies, speaking at community forums, and founding support networks for victims of racial bias. I would turn my personal story into the catalyst for a broader movement, building bridges between generations. Will racism end by 2050? That depends on each of us. If we continue to watch passively, prejudice will persist. But if we act today, 2050 can mark the beginning of a more equitable society where our children no longer inherit the painful memories of racial injustice. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional. All characters and events are creations of the author and are not intended to reference or criticize any real person. It is designed to raise awareness of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating one another with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose all forms of violence, prejudice, and injustice. Please consider this before viewing.